Okay, I'm not sure what the situation is with the group at St. Clare's, but for those of you who've joined, I'll get started because I don't want you to hang on necessarily. I hope everyone with travels home and things is doing okay at this disrupted and dislocated time. I'm sorry that we're not able to do this in person, but hopefully what I'm able to share with you over the next period of time is going to be useful for you as you start to plan ahead with your university applications. So what I've been asked to talk about is finding fit in US admissions. So if this is not what you were expecting, then log off and go and do something else. But this is going to be the topic we're going to be talking about today. My name is David Hawkins. I am an independent university advisor, formerly a head of careers, head of higher education at schools in the UK and internationally. And I am a member of the organisations you see on the screen below, which hopefully gives you some confidence that I might be able to give you some information and know what I'm talking about, but also that I'm connected to the global admissions community and regularly do events and attend conferences of these organisations. Our job at the University Guys, the company I run, is to help students, quite often students at schools who don't necessarily have the same level of support as you do at St. Clare's, to reduce the stress in their application procedures, help them apply to universities all over the world. And that is what we're going to do. What we're focusing on then today is helping you understand the US process, particularly if you might be relatively new to these processes, and give you some information about how the whole approach of choosing where to apply in the US is actually very different from almost every other university system, and how making good choices about the type and style and culture of the universities you're looking to in the US is fundamental to this process. It's not like looking for universities in Western Europe or the British Isles, where you match your grades to the subject and maybe a city or an area you're looking at. You could be extraordinarily well qualified for the universities you're applying to, but because you don't fit them, they may turn you down. So it's really important that you understand some of these processes as we go through. So two questions that I will go through, and something you might want to think about here as you're looking at studying in the US are the two questions on the screen now. The first one, what is the Ivy League? And the second one, how many students are in each year group in all US schools right now? And these two are really important to try and get your heads around choosing colleges in the US. The answer to the first question is it's a sports conference. It is 8 US universities that started playing sports against each other in midway through the 20th century because they shared similar characteristics within their athletics programs and the size of their student body. Interestingly, there were 7 who first started. They wanted to have Colgate as the 8th, but Colgate is a little bit far away, so they asked Brown, and that's how Brown became an Ivy League university. The reason I put that there is quite often I hear students saying, I want to go to the Ivy League. But the Ivy League is not an academic designation. It's not the eighth best, it's not the 8th most selective, it's not the 8th most prestigious US universities in any of those categories. They are all really, really good universities. But if the reason that makes them Ivy League is that their sports attributes and the way in which they fund their sports programs is similar, a lot of other things between them are going to be different. And quite commonly, I hear people say, I want to go to the Ivy League. And as an experienced counsellor, when someone says to me, I want to go to the Ivy League, what I'm hearing is someone saying, I really don't know much about how to do US applications. Because a student who might fit one Ivy League university, say, for example, Brown, is going to be choosing Brown because of the academic and social culture of that university. Now, Columbia, another Ivy League university, has a very, very different academic and social culture. And so a student who fits Brown probably doesn't fit Columbia, and on within the Ivy League. So saying I want to go to the Ivy League really isn't a very sensible way of doing it, because you need to know more about the style of these universities. Now, the second reason why that's potentially quite a dangerous thing to think about when you're choosing US colleges is to understand this second thing about the scale of the sector. In year 12 right now, in lower 6 in the US, there are 3.7 million students. 3.7 million students. And that's just a number to try and give you the vastness of the sector that we're talking about in the US. If you look at the UK, we've got something like 130, 140 degree granting institutions. You can go look at the research universities in the Netherlands, and we're looking at sort of 20 to 30. You go to Ireland, there are 9. And so in Europe, we're quite often used to there being a relatively small number of universities. In the United States, we're pushing over 4,000 degree granting institutions because that 3.7 million figure is a very large figure. Now, when you say the Ivy League has a little over 20,000 spaces a year, you can see how one doesn't fit into the other. And now that actually is important to understand, because if there are that many students in the US, if you say from that 3.7 million, maybe the top 10% are going to be really, really great students. And that's still 370,000 students. Now, those students are going to go to universities, which will be good. They have to be good because good students are going to them. Harvard and Stanford and MIT aren't great universities because there's something special in the drinking water. They're great universities because really talented students go there. But if there are more really talented students in the US because of the scale of the sector, then it goes to figure that there are going to be more really, really good universities. And so a key thing when you're starting to look for fit in the US universities is to really understand that when I and people like me who know this day in, day out talk about a good US university, we might be talking about 100 or 150 different universities as being quote unquote good, which you might be thinking of 10. And it's really important to understand that the scale of this, the small scale of the Ivy League and the Ivy-like institutions that are in that sort of top 20 bracket for selectivity doesn't mean that actually there are other universities which aren't quite as good within the top 30, top 50, and top 100. So it's really important that you overcome that first thing and particularly understand the terminology being quite different. So this is statistics from the last cycle. So this is the students who went and started university in August, September 2019. These were the admissions rates at a bunch of US universities. And you'll see names on here. You look at Harvard accepted 4.5% of its applicants. Yale accepted 5.9% of its applicants. Columbia's at 5.1%. So these are very, very selective universities. And you say that 4.5% is sort of like a 1 in 20 admit rate. And you look at like Harvard's, maybe sorry, Oxford's 1 in 5, Imperial's about 1 in 10. These are super, super selective universities. But equally, there might be places on here that you've not heard of. For example, Bowdoin, wonderful, highly regarded liberal arts college in Maine, 9% admit rate. Duke, top tier, more selective, highly ranked than some of the Ivies, 7% admit rate. Vanderbilt, 6.3% admit rate. Swarthmore, 9%, Rice, 9%, and so on and so forth. So when we're looking at the scale of the US sector, particularly at the most selective end, it's really important that students understand the level of selectivity we're talking about here. We also then need to look at the size of these universities in the context of the United Kingdom. And quite often we're hearing about students wanting to go to Harvard, Yale, Brown, Tufts, Princeton, MIT, these kind of places. Now, these actually are relatively small universities. Harvard is going to make 1,800 offers a year for the whole world, full stop. So typically we're looking at the numbers of students from the UK who might get places at these US universities. And so if we're looking at the ranges I put here, and these are best guesses based on about 120 different UK schools I was in last year, these are the sort of ranges about the number of students from the UK who might get places at these US universities. And so when we're looking at the profile you might need in order to be successful in applying to these, we'll be looking at students, if you have GCSEs, of having A stars A's, 9s, 8s, 7s. We're looking at A levels of A star AA, IB 40 or higher, and we're looking for other things as well. Now, if you might bring something else, you might be a hyper-talented musician or a soccer player, or you've got significant legacy at the university, that can be different. But again, just to put some information on just how competitive it is at these really hyper competitive universities. However, you should be reassured that in the US, going to a top name brand Ivy League, Ivy-like university is not the be-all, nor is it the end-all of the US process. And again, it's a big cultural difference when we're looking at European processes versus US processes. So this is data taken from Harvard Law School. So Harvard Law School would be where students would go after having done one degree. They would then go to Harvard Law School to train to be a lawyer. If anyone's seen the film Legally Blonde, you will recognize that Elle is at a university first, and then she goes on to law school afterwards. Now, Harvard Law School, in the last admission cycle, recruited students from 185 universities. You'll notice Harvard is on there somewhere in the H's, but there will be a pile of universities on here from the US and around the world that you may never have heard of. And what this is saying is these other universities aren't good enough to get you into Harvard Law School. So it doesn't work in the same way as it might do in the UK or in Europe, where you go to the best university you can get into. If I don't get into an Ivy League university, I am a failure. Completely not the case in the US. I would also argue not the case in those other countries. But particularly in the US, a student can, for example, go to Louisiana State University, can go to CUNY Hunter College, can go to the University of Alabama, can go to the University of Maryland, and on and on and on, and still get a degree that is good enough for them to then go on to one of the most competitive law schools in the entire world. So when we're looking for fit in the US university process, the whole point of giving you this information is to understand that just going for names, going for places you've heard of, may not be the best solution. And actually, for students who are looking to go on to postgraduate programs after, you might be better off going to a slightly less selective university and being the best student at that university, maybe graduating at the very top of your class, being a commencement speaker, doing all the wonderful research opportunities, and most importantly, getting those amazing references from your professors. That's probably going to put you in a better situation than maybe being in the bottom 5 or 10% of a hyper-selective, highly ranked US university. So it's about fit. When we're looking for US universities, it is about finding that fit. And the fit of how you will match a university is really, really important. Now, I'll put a caveat in here as well. Quite often I meet students and they go, well, it's fine. I don't care whether I go to a university that's got that academic style or this academic style, or I don't care if I'm in the city, or I don't care in the countryside. I'll be fine wherever I go as long as it's a good name. And I get that and I can understand that. The bit that students who say that might be missing is, well, that's fine, but the university also selects you based on if you fit them. And so the universities are going to look at the massive amount of information that comes about you in your US applications, your essays, the references, your activities, the whole kind of profile of you that they build, and say, look, yes, we think you're extraordinarily talented, but you don't fit us. So the US process is about fit on both sides. It's very much the university being a round hole, you being a round peg, and the two fitting together. And if the university is a round hole and looks at you as being that square peg, they're going to go, yeah, you're great, but go and find a square peg university. You don't suit us. So it's about fit on the academics and about fit on the culture. Now, there are all sorts of different ways you can find fit. This is an extract from a piece of software that I use with the students that I'm working with called Coursera. And Coursera asks students to go through about 140 different categories and rate those categories based on the things that the university they want to go to must have, things that it would be nice for university to have, things they definitely don't want the university to have, and things they're not bothered about. And this is a really important process for students to go through, whether you're using a process like Coursera, whether you're talking to your advisors at school or somebody else, to work out actually what is the academic and cultural fit I want. So, for example, the student whose sample I put here has chosen, yes, some subjects they're interested in, but also some things about the sort of culture of the university, the academic style of things, lots of class choices, study environment, other things. Good fitness facilities are important to the student. And you look at on and on and on. You can find two equally talented students, but with very different preferences, are then going to tailor their applications to different universities and will indeed apply to different universities. So students need to choose the kind of university they're looking for, rather than just the name brand. So we've got 3 universities on here. In the middle, we have Dartmouth College, one of the Ivy League. On one end, we've got UCLA, and the other end, we've got NYU. Now, these are all name brand US universities. You've probably all heard of them. And therefore, they're going to be looking for talented students. These would all want students with high test scores, so NYU doesn't require the test, but high grades at school, impressive students, but different types of students. Dartmouth is a small community in Hanover, New Hampshire. It's a couple of hours north of Boston. It's a couple of hours further north of Bennington. It's in the mountains. There's not a lot else going on in the town of Hanover other than Dartmouth. And you need to be able to, therefore, work in a small community. You've got to be able to get on with everyone else around you. It's not like you're going to be able to pop out to a massive museum down the road or find a whole social life really beyond the university. Now, Dartmouth actually, when you apply to them, will ask for an additional reference beyond the references from your teachers. They want a reference from a friend, because Dartmouth know that in order to fit their community, you need to be a good friend. You need to have people who can write a reference for you explaining what role that person has played in your life. So Dartmouth, as well as the high academics, is looking for people who could be members of a community. Now, NYU, in contrast, is in one of the world's most mega cities. Yeah, it's a hyper-urban campus right downtown in Manhattan. Your dorm could be on the 30th floor. You come down the lift, you elbow your way through people commuting to work. You then go up another 5 floors to the library or the lecture hall and stuff. And so at NYU, actually, that community thing doesn't really matter so much. When you apply to NYU, they want to know, why do you want NYU? One of the key things NYU says is that the university is in and of the city. So a student who's really interested in popular music might actually find all their avenues for that beyond the bounds of the university. A student interested in archaeology might be using the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So a student who really needs that urban experience is going to fit NYU. Very different from Dartmouth. And then at UCLA, in contrast, their admissions process doesn't require any references or predicted grades or anything from your school whatsoever. UCLA is looking for students who can be very independent, who can do this whole process without the assistance really of their school. So again, looking for a different type of student. So the idea then of fit is not just you fitting these communities, but the universities constructing their admissions processes to find students who fit them. And so on this kind of bigger cultural fit of the kind of university you're looking for, it's really important that students at this stage in their IB1 year in lower six are really working out what kind of university experience you're looking for. Then we also have the academic fit. This is something that can be really quite baffling for students who don't really have expertise of the process. And the question that I've posed on the screen for you here is, what do you think you'll study if you go to MIT? Now, in MIT's heads, in people's heads, in popular culture and how people think about it, it's an engineering school. It's all about STEM. It's all about maths and physics and chemistry and stuff. And lots of students will try and apply there thinking that's what I'm going to study. Well, interestingly, MIT only offers one degree. They offer the Bachelor of Science. And if you're doing the Bachelor of Science, you have to do a core. The core is equally divided between the science and maths on the one hand, and humanities, arts, and social sciences on the other. So every student at MIT, whether you're majoring in physics, in chemistry, in biology, in maths, or even in music, is going to have to study the humanities, the arts, and the social sciences. You will likely take a class in Shakespeare whilst majoring in engineering at MIT. MIT, as I was talking about with Dartmouth, test this through the references. MIT will want one of your two teacher references to be from a non-STEM teacher. So MIT are looking for students who have track record in writing essays, in being able to analyse historical events or art or philosophy and those kind of things. Now, if you're looking at MIT thinking, well, I don't like that kind of stuff, I don't like writing essays about old books and literature or history or philosophy, then do you fit MIT? Is that really the place you want to go? That's because the US system works in a very different way to the UK model. The UK university model is very much a set menu, like going to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant and want Thai food, you go to a Thai restaurant and you get Thai food. If you want to study history, you go to a UK university for a history degree and you get history. Now, in the US model, it's like a crazy buffet. You can do whatever you want. And so typically in the US system, only a third of the classes you would take over the 4-year degree would be within your major. So if you were going to major in history at US University, only a third of it would be history classes. Now, the other 2/3 would be made up of a combination of things the university says you have to study, like I just showed at MIT, their core curriculum, and things that you would like to study. So that might be a double major. It might be a major and a minor, or it just might be a bunch of interesting classes you want to take. Because the UK degree is a final assessment process, so your degree classification comes on the results you get in exams and maybe some coursework at the end of the degree, whereas a US degree is assessed continuously in each class semester by semester. You have huge flexibility in the US system to mix and match to build your own bespoke curriculum. However, not every US university is going to have those requirements for what they say you have to study and the flexibility of what else you can study the same as each other US university. And so when you are finding fit in US universities, you need to understand how is their curriculum designed. So I mentioned MIT as an example as well, but in contrast, here's Brown. So Brown actually, quite differently to many other US universities, has no required core curriculum or distribution requirements. So Brown is not going to tell you you have to take a bunch of classes that you don't want to take. The only requirement, as it says down the bottom, is that you must be able to demonstrate excellent skill in written English. So a student who was thinking maybe I'm going to go to MIT and only do physics is going to be surprised. And that student who might only want to take physics actually would be perhaps a better academic fit for Brown. Now, each US university is going to offer a nuanced difference to their curriculum. And so when students are researching where they fit in the US university process, they do need to be looking into the core curriculum and the distribution requirements. And so when I said at the start that the student who might fit Brown might not fit Columbia, well, it's because Columbia actually have quite a strict first-year curriculum, including a lot of reading-intensive freshman seminars, whereas a student at Brown has complete flexibility really to build their own curriculum. And so a student who might fit the Columbia curriculum is probably not going to fit the Brown curriculum, and vice versa. Now, when you apply to the US universities, they're going to ask you to explain this. Columbia will ask you questions about reading when you apply to them. Brown will ask you curriculums about how you might suit and take advantage of their open curriculum. So it's not just a case of going, as I said, well, I'm fine at both. I just love to go to an awesome name brand university. If you can't articulate coherently and honestly how you fit these universities, then in these hyper competitive university processes where 19 out of 20 people don't get in, you're really not going to cut the mustard. Beyond that, there are even more extreme ways of doing it. So St. John's College, one of my favourite colleges in the US, potentially some of you might not have heard of, an extraordinarily well-regarded curriculum, has what they call the Great Books. So students who are going to St. John's are going to do a completely different curriculum when they get their degree and read the great books of Western civilization. You're going to start with maybe the ancients, going to the classics and Greek and Roman, moving up to the modern day. You'll read Einstein's papers, you'll follow Salieri for music, you will go and read all sorts of interesting works of philosophy. And many students will look at this and go, well, I can't think of anything worse than studying this kind of stuff. The occasional student might look at this and go, gosh, this sounds absolutely phenomenal. And so this is a really good example of looking for fit in the US university process. And you wouldn't want to turn up at St. John's College thinking you weren't going to be just spending your entire time reading books. You would be very surprised if you got there and found that out. Another example is engineering. And as I've shown you at MIT, it's important to understand that engineering may not be just, as in the Western European model, going and studying a lot of engineering. And I actually recorded a podcast recently. My podcast, The University Guy, is found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, Castbox, all those kind of places to look it up. But this was a podcast about specifically studying STEM and engineering in the US. And it's a good example of actually understanding, again, how academic fit is quite important. Now, you could go to a university like, say, Harvard and major in engineering. But a major in engineering is still only going to be a third of those classes, and you're going to have to take those other 2/3 of things that are not going to be engineering. You could, however, go to an engineering school. So you could go to Columbia, which has its own school of engineering, as well as a College of Arts and Sciences. And therefore, the things you're going to have to study beyond engineering within an engineering school are going to be even less. You could go to an Institute of Technology, and I said MIT is not the best example, but Florida Tech, and I speak to Marie V. Walker from Florida Tech on this podcast. As an Institute of Technology, you're not going to be finding yourself taking classes in history and languages and literature. You're going to be straight into the technical studies. So places like Florida Tech, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, New Jersey Institute of Technology, the Colorado School of Mines, and others are going to get you straight into the STEM. We also have a thing called 3+2 programs, 3-2 programs in the US, where you can actually go for 3 years to a liberal arts college, really high-ranked liberal arts college, say like Amherst, and study a broad curriculum and do some maths and physics. And then for your final 2 years, transfer to maybe the Columbia School of Engineering, the WashU School of Engineering, and finish off with your engineering degree there. So again, another example where, yes, you might think, I want to go to the USA and I want to study engineering. Well, even within that, there are 4 different ways in which your engineering education can happen. And so it's important, again, to look at fit. Then beyond that, we're looking at the type of community that you might want. Again, very different communities available to you here. In the middle, I've got the University of California, San Diego. Very interesting architecture, a high-ranked school. Just because it may be the 3rd or 4th best University of California campus doesn't mean it's not an amazing school and will rank in the top 100 in any world ranking that you'll see. But it's a big public university designed mostly for people from California. You can have people there who will not be living on campus. They will be commuting from their homes. And it's designed to be mostly for Californians with some out-of-state students coming. So UC San Diego is going to be one particular community. Now, I've also got here Wellesley College. Wellesley College, highly ranked, incredibly prestigious liberal arts college, not far from Boston. Lots of people aspire to it. It's a women's college. It's where Hillary Clinton went to college. It's where Madeleine Albright went to college. And so it's going to be a particular kind of community that will fit, obviously, only potentially some students on the call today, but also within that, a set of students who may be interested in going to the particular education that a progressive, aspirational, and campaigning women's community might want, like at Wellesley. And then I've got a picture here of the University of Michigan, the big house. This stadium at Michigan sits 110,000 people. And if you're looking for that stereotypical big-time athletics, pep rally, school spirit, wear the colours, marching band kind of experience, then you can find at the University of Michigan and other public flagship universities, University of Indiana, University of Illinois, University of Washington, all those kind of experiences as well. So again, the kind of experience you want at US University will again steer you between these 3 similarly ranked universities, all looking for similar types of academics within their students, but the community is going to be very different. And there's a fun example of this. Here is a t-shirt that's printed by the University of Chicago. Students at the University of Chicago have nicknamed it Where Fun Comes to Die. It's an 8% admit rate, it's a top-ranked university, but it's a very quirky, kind of geeky university. If anyone starts to look at the University of Chicago and see the essay questions, you'll find some very interesting essay questions. The student I worked with this year, who's got in early decisions at the University of Chicago, wrote her application essay about cheese strings. Now, that might not be the academic application essay you'd write to other places, but at University of Chicago, where students take pride in it being where fun comes to die, that kind of essay really resonated with their admissions department. Another element of fit to look at is the difference between college and university. I and others in this field use the terms interchangeably, but they are actually different things. A university will have undergraduates completing their bachelor's degree, but it will also have people doing their master's degrees and doing their doctoral degrees. So Harvard, as I said, has a law school, it has a business school, it has other things as well. So it is a university, but the undergraduates are going to be in the college at Harvard. However, there are many universities, I mentioned a few already, where they are just colleges. So there are no master's students, there are no doctoral students. Everything about that university is about teaching undergraduates. So Wellesley, as I've mentioned, is just a college. St. John's is just a college. And when you look at the US rankings, you will see on US News and World Report a ranking for the universities. And those are probably the places that you've heard of because they get in the news because of wonderful discoveries that their professors are making, because their professors will go on to BBC, CNN and give interviews and kind of things. And that's wonderful for them. They are getting those world rankings. Because a college doesn't have those people doing that kind of stuff, it is focused on undergraduate teaching, you're going to find a different kind of ranking. So the US News also has a separate ranking for liberal arts colleges. These are amazing universities. As I mentioned there, Pomona is more selective than Brown, Penn, and Dartmouth. Colleges such as Amherst, Williams, and Oberlin have national reputations. If you walk down Fifth Avenue in New York and a stranger bumps into you and asks where you went to college, if you said I went to Bowdoin, it will be as impressive to them as saying that you went to Princeton. It's so understanding where, again, you might fit somewhere that might be primarily a college and undergraduate focused teaching based university, or would you perhaps fit the bigger experience of going to a university? So when you're making sure you're fit, you're going to be going through this process of holistic admissions. The university is looking at you in a whole, as the whole person, as to how you fit the community. So in that, your teacher and your counsellor references, so the reference that comes from your subject teachers and the reference that comes from your college counsellors, are going to be fundamentally important because they are going to explain the kind of person you are in each classroom, whether you are a willing participant, whether you are always engaged, whether you're always leading debate, whether you're someone who maybe actually is preferring to do things on their own, that you'll listen to the teacher, but debate might not be your thing, whether you continue learning outside of class, the kind of conversations you have with your teacher, they're going to see whether you fit their style of learning at university and also the sort of person you are around school. What do you get involved with? How are you in the boarding houses? The sort of person you would be and how you fit the community. The university is going to be interested in whether you've done any leadership activities, and that doesn't have to be doing something seriously impressive. It could just be very quietly helping a few friends, mentoring people, just doing a little project. They also don't want to see whether you've taken on some initiative. Have you started something? Have you seen a problem and done something about it? In a typical year, this year may be different because of the situation we all face, but they're also going to be interested in your summer activities. What have you done? Some universities will actually ask you directly, how have you spent the last 2 summers? And so all these things can come out in the essays. I mentioned the University of Chicago being known for its quirky essays. This is one of the choices you have this year. Cats have 9 lives. Pac-Man has 3 lives. Isotopes have half lives. How many lives does something else have and why? You might be asked a question about, Georgetown here, what does it mean to be educated? How might Georgetown help you get there? Talk about something in your life, Loyola Marymount here, how are your choices? So you get these kind of college-specific essays to help find that holistic process, to kind of see how you might fit that community. But colleges will also ask you shorter questions. So this is an extract from the Common Application from Princeton's questions. They want to know about your favourite movie, your favourite website, how your friends would talk about you, and a few other things like that as well. And you can see on the other side of the screen the sort of questions that Princeton are asking. And so all this kind of comes into the process of trying to find fit. So for you now, kind of thinking about the process, so certainly if you're going to be going through this on your own, potentially at home, things to ask yourself: what do you or don't you want to study? What are the range of subjects you might be looking for? And potentially within that, what can you tolerate? Okay, so I'm not keenest on English literature, but I'd be happy to take a class in English literature. I'm not that good at maths, but if there was an accounting class that ticked that maths requirement, I'd be quite happy. So what do you or don't you want to study? What style of learning do you prefer? Are you happy being in a big lecture hall? There's 500 of you, there's a professor talking at you, you're taking notes, and off you go on your own. Do you prefer small scale intensive learning? Do you want debate? Do you want to be challenged? Do you want to have those kind of things? So what style of learning do you prefer? What sort of people do you learn best with? What is the kind of other kind of people? Are you someone who's really motivated about project-based learning, and therefore you want to go to a university that's going to be taking people who are really hands-on entrepreneurial? Do you learn best with people who are all about just talking through issues? Would you rather be outside? Would you rather be in huge communities? And then this last thing is, what else do you need to be fulfilled while at university? When you go through the course cyber activity, then when I do it with the students I work with in my capacity as a private advisor, I'm trying to find these other things that might help me narrow down to that 4,500 US universities. So sometimes I might work with students who are really into skiing, which case we might target the universities at places where they can ski. And actually, there are universities which do have their own ski slopes. It might be that they're really interested in LGBTQ plus issues, and therefore that's going to be something that they need to have looked at their university. It might be that they just really need to access the countryside. I worked with a student this year, and one of his criteria was that he really wanted to go to a university where he could do a lot of outdoor pursuits. He wanted to do fishing, he wanted to go out mountain biking, he wanted to be able to run into the wilderness. And again, that's a very different kind of university experience that he would need to be fulfilled than someone who might want that hyper urban experience. So all these things that you need to consider above and beyond when you're trying to discover fit in the US university. There'll be some handouts I know being sent to you by Ms. Morehouse, but the three-step process that I work through, and I would encourage you guys to work through as well, is firstly to work out where you're going to go. Where is your university application process leading you? And certainly if you are applying to the US for 2021 start, you probably need to be getting on with that quite now. Most of the students I'm working with already are about 3/4 of the way to having a good sense of what their college list. Depending on where you're applying to, what do you need to be able to do? SAT and ACT is a big factor people will look at, but actually your list of colleges might mean that you don't need them. You might be applying to test optional colleges. There might be interviews, there might be demonstrated interest needed to prepare, and then finally with the applications at the end. If you would like more information about any of the topics that I've talked about today, my contact details are there now. This is a QR code. Hopefully, if you hold your mobile phone up to the screen just with the camera app, it will give you a sign-up sheet. But I'm available for students for a half-hour consultation completely free of charge, just to discuss your university options. And I do have some capacity, as do my colleagues, to take on maybe another sort of dozen or so students to support them in a private capacity through to 2021 entry. I'm conscious of time, but I have probably got a couple of minutes. So if someone would like to ask a question, in the chat window, you'll be able to see a typing thing. So I'll stay on the line for another couple of minutes for anyone who would like to ask any questions. If, however, that is you done, please do feel free to log off. I'm hoping the group from St. Clare's did manage to log on as well. If not, they'll be able to get the recording. So please type me a question in the chat box if you'd like to answer that. I'll stick on for a couple of minutes. But otherwise, thank you for joining me today. I hope that was useful. And for those of you who have had to make your way home, I hope the journey was quite smooth, or as smooth as possible. And I hope you are able to find some sense of normality in this slightly strange period of time that we are living through. Thank you very much.